I wouldn't have the story today and be in a position of wisdom to write my story if I hadn't experienced what it was like to get up and get knocked down again, and get up and get knocked down again, and get up and get knocked down again. I wouldn't know how to do that and teach people how to plug into spirit, because it fosters trust in the process and you receive miracles along the way. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have understood how important my mindset is. What you think influences what you feel, which influences
Mhm.
how you then act and behave. I wouldn't have had my son, which is the biggest blessing to me in my life, an honor
Yeah.
to be a mum. I was in a space of turmoil and confusion and sometimes grievance, but I share this so that people could understand that my life's not perfect. The
Yeah.
messiness is where you grow and where you learn and where you come out on through the tunnel on the other side.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, it is my honor to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. Their time, 24 hours, has been offered to every one of us. What you do with that 24 hours will tell me so much about you. And so I always invite people to learn to honor and respect time. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful created us. It's a living force that gives life, if you will. And we want to honor Pamela for coming and first spending her quality time, because once it's spent, it is spent. And the other is allowing us access to her vulnerability through her journey. And so we want to honor her and thank her for coming and giving us this time and her preciousness that she has gained, the wisdom, the knowledge, the insight. We want to dance with that. So we honor her. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me so much, Ken. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, honestly, truly.
It's an honor to have you. As I said to you, I love to ask this question because I think it's just such a beautiful question to throw at someone on an interview on the very first interaction. And my question is, I mentioned that we have two journeys in life. One is the independent journey, and the other is the interdependent, where we serve. My question to you, Pamela, is how do you serve mankind?
Sorry, I didn't, they broke up. How do I say something mankind? I didn't hear that part.
How do you serve mankind?
How do I serve mankind? For as long as I can remember, I've always had a spirit of wanting to help. Even in school, I remember as a teenager, we were asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "A social worker." And at the time, I still remember this guy's name. It was Bruno Rodonker. He laughed and he said, "Why do you want to be a social worker? You don't make any money." And that in my mind, it didn't
Mhm.
even compute. I just felt, well, I want to help people. And when I look at my life and where I am at this point in it, and I look back at all the tribulations that I've faced and gone through, I feel like I've gone through each of those tribulations: death, relocation, separations, traumatic births, you name it. I seem to have experienced it to actually help other people come out the other side. Because didn't, if you didn't know me personally and know my stories, you would never think that I've been through any of these traumatic experiences, excuse me, because of my positive outlook. I'm sorry. So I
That's okay.
feel
We'll
like
cut it out for you. So I'm not going to
it's
embarrass
okay.
you.
So I feel like I serve mankind by helping people overcome difficulties in their life that keep them from connecting, keep them from becoming the person that they really are, and keep them from connecting to a higher purpose. I think that as somebody who has a healing spirit, that's my purpose in life, and I feel that that's why I've come.
Tell people one of the most cruel things that the programmers tell us is that we such powerful beings that we are to be born, go through educational system, get a profession, come out, marry somebody, get a fence, a white picket fence, and a couple of dogs, some kids
Right.
maybe. We get old and then we die. I think that is the one most morbid plan I've ever heard in my life. But that is the program that they have been feeding mankind for a mighty long time. But the purpose of us coming here, I believe, Pamela, is to, like you said, and there are people like yourself that have gone through their journey to help people to find not just who they are, but also their assignment that they have here on this planet, because I
Exactly.
believe all of us came here with assignment. One of our customs, Pamela, is to go back. I like to go back into what I call the beginnings of our beginnings. And we visit a few states, places, location that we stay for a brief time until we began to escort ourselves to become quote unquote an adult. And one of those very first spaces that we reside for about 18 years or so, and that's a short time, is the family, the first location. Here in this family location, Pamela, we're going to learn couple of things. Our communication skills are learned there. Our beliefs are developed right there. Our pattern of behavior right there also. We're going to learn about mindsets, and because of the programs that we're receiving via religion, family, all these different things, you're going to have those limitations right there. What was your family unit like?
My family unit, I have to be respectful for them, but I have to obviously be honest with my truth. Growing up, I grew up in a dual culture. So obviously I'm from England and my parents are from Western Africa. And so I was the youngest, should be older. My dad's in his 90s now, my mum's in her 70s. Growing up in a dual culture, the English way was typically dust yourself off, get on with it, and then roll your sleeve up and get up a bit. And in the African culture as well, it's kind of similar. Western Africa, so it's Ghana and Nigeria. But also there was a high respect for your elders, obviously. So I was raised with that concept. And a lot of the time is you don't share feelings. It was, look, the only emotions that I remember were either you're happy or you're sad or you're mad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had, from what I remember, I had a good childhood. I felt like I was loved. I felt like my needs were met, but it wasn't communication. It was more or less children should be seen and not heard. That's the way that I felt anyway. And I was the youngest and I always had something to say. That's for sure in my mouth, you know? So, but even with that, I always wanted to talk and would talk, even though I felt silence, not just at home at times, but when you're a child and maybe you have words of wisdom and sometimes things come out and people are like, well, how would she even know that? So it's like dimming, you know what I mean? Like I would always feel like my light would be dimmed or I'd have to dim myself in order to fit in somewhere. And that followed me for a time. Like I said, it's only that recently, I say recently, it's been years that I've figured this out that, you know what, I am not dimming my light anymore to make other people comfortable because we're all people of light and we should be coming and expressing our own light. If my light's making you uncomfortable, then that's something more within yourself, that work that you need to do then in order for that. So, I mean, my family unit, my parents did the best that they could. The communication I felt wasn't as open as I felt that it needed to be. And so that's what I knew when I started my family and with my son, there is nothing that we can't talk about, and he's about to be 18. So, I mean, I know that he's in that phase where young men are sort of like, you know, he will still come to me and talk to me about things. And I'm at least grateful for that because I feel like if you don't have communication and open communication, then anything can happen, tragedy.
Yeah, it's the old ways, as they say. You speak when you're spoken to, and
Yeah.
you don't belong in where the adults are. You can't share nothing. Like you said, I can't
Yes.
remember laughing or anything. I could remember is crying from being beaten up or something like that from them because you stepped out of line. And so I can't remember anything much at all as you were talking about it. I was like, oh my God, that's so true.
You remember?
Because that's basically my culture as well.
Right.
And, that's just a part of how we function. And again, that's the tradition of that particular culture and so forth. And it causes, like you said, some people will shrink from that, not allow themselves to be seen as a result. And that's where those threads that I talked about, that's one of the things, that threads of enlightenment that I noticed in my life, that those threads began with me while I was a young man. And those threads will come with me and all of us as a
Yeah.
grown individual. And usually life is unpacking many of those threads as they become you become more aware of them, and life is cleaning up some of those threads that we have, because some of them force us into a space of survival, as you said, where we stay there and survive until it no longer serves us. And usually in our 20s, and that we began to notice that that doesn't serve us because we are spinning out of control and all this type of stuff. As you're there and you shrunk, if you will, and began to hide, what was your communication skills outside of family? How were you relating to others away from the condition, the programming of restriction? What was your communication skills like with the friends and family, or people outside from the family, where you're not being restricted, if you will?
I mean, that's interesting that you asked this question because I never really had a problem communicating with other people. I've always had friends. I've always been able to make friends easily. I'm a conversationalist. Out of our family unit, I wasn't affected. I was able to connect with the people that I needed to connect. But it was just at home. I think when there's a kind of space where you're a bit unsure of what to say and when to say, it breeds some secrecy. You know what I mean? So it's like you feel there's certain things that you cannot share because it's like, well, I don't know how this is going to be received. And obviously, like I say, in that culture, now times have way evolved. But back then, you might get licks for something. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, you got hit.
You,
Not
you
might, you
know,
got hit.
you got, you know what I mean? So that times it
Yeah.
evolved. And like I said, my parents, they weren't abusive by any means or anything. They did the best that they could. But my gosh, you're just thinking, you don't know. But for me, the threads that I see that I had to untangle more so with this component of communicating or not or being unsure of when to do so was the emotional part. Like I said, there was either happy, sad, mad, and expressing that, you know what I mean? And what I know, especially now in my profession and what I do, I'm still doing social work, but it's different on my terms now, which I love, is that when you're angry, you're hurt. There's always a simmering emotion underneath anger, but it's like the easiest way for it to come out is to just project that outright. So that was what was more difficult for me to unpack, and it wasn't until I wrote my book that's when I understood. And when I, for my personal development, sought therapists to untangle that because I went into survival mode. That was what was more difficult for me was being able to feel my emotion and then release it in a healthy way.
Yeah, it's amazing how good we are creating our way by which we survive in order to
Yeah.
move through and get out from location. As you're moving through in your life and you're heading to that space where you know that mom and dad is going to talk about education and where you're going, and you better and you better and you better. At that place, that conversation, those conversations that took place as far as the educational piece, what field of study did you pick, Pamela? Why did you pick that field?
Well, it was interesting because I moved here. I was 21 when I moved here in 2000. And when I graduated in England, that was like 30 years ago now, I went into work. And when I had that conversation with them, first I was going to go to college. And then I was temping the summer just to get some extra money in, doing temporary work in a warehouse and stuff. And then I was going to go on to study sports medicine. But because I did so good working at the temping agencies, like you go to an agency, then they then send you out to go work. Well, because I was
Mhm.
dependable, I would show up every day. I was on time, and the reports back from the warehouse that worked really good. Well, then they offered me a position in the actual temping agency, and so I took it. And so that ended up being a learning curve for me in itself in terms of how brutal employers could be. But in answering your question, having that conversation and conversations like that with my parents wasn't difficult because I felt supported at least. They would definitely support me. And they knew at that point, I'm over 18. I mean, it's my decision, which like I did learn. Anyway, I ended up coming to America and I picked psychology because I'm just fascinated with human behavior and the way people behave and just human beings in general. It was more in my scope and my field of study, to be honest. I'm just curious about people. So it was natural for me to go into psychology and sociology by that way, um, and not specific to social work itself. But I knew even going into psychology, I knew that that was an avenue that I could go into just to study and help people. There's always that component. Like there's no escaping it. I think that's the language of my soul. And I think people know that because I always attract a lot of people who are sick and
Yeah.
people who need help.
Well, let's go back a little. I mean, after you're attracting all the sick people, people that need help,
Okay,
when
and
you
that's fair enough.
when you went to work, because here's this young woman going into this field, and you said there was some learning curve within there, and you get to see some real behavior about people behavior that will probably drive you straight into psychology
No,
to, to,
consciously, right? Or
to
unconsciously.
Yeah, to figure out what just happened back there at this like this corporation that I work for, this building. So talk to us there. Here's this young woman. What was it that you encountered that kind of put the fear of God in you, if you will, with people? Because people can be an interesting group, if you will, especially when you're dealing with a young woman being thrust into that type of arena. What did you see, and how did it affect you?
Wow, Ken, you're making me go way back. I like this though. This is deep. You have that quality about you. That's good. But okay, so exploitation, manipulation, deception. I understood as well that I was wasting my life away, because what would happen is that I would get there 5:30, I believe, and this is going back just under 30 years. So it was like I would work from about 6, we'll say 6 a.m. I would have to get there between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And I wouldn't get home until 9 o'clock at night, between 9:30. And that was my life for, I think I worked there for about a year. Like I was getting sick. Even if in that whole year, I had one day off. I was sick. I ended up getting mono and I had the one day off, but my boss guilted me back into coming back into work, because they had given me, I had the responsibility that I had was they had this book, and in the book, you had to list every worker that we sent out to work and the
Yeah.
jobs that they would be under. And so the job was each day we had to fill that book and make sure that, okay, if we've got 10 people going to a warehouse, we've got 10 people who are going to maybe office jobs, we've got 5 who are maybe going to sanitation work. All of these had to be filled with the different companies. So your day would be spent ringing around, calling people up, making sure that they're coming into work the next day. And if not, some people were cold calling. I was cold calling to make sure. So I also had to deal with office politics for the first time as well, because there was a guy who had the task of doing that job. And he was out one day and I ended up having to do it. But because I did it so well, the bosses decided, well, I was going to do it. And I just was like, oh, okay. I didn't think anything about it. So then I had to deal with jealousy from this person.
Mhm.
This guy was really jealous. And obviously, as an adult looking back, I could understand and I would have handled it differently. But I mean, I was
Yeah.
18, it was difficult. So then I couldn't understand why he was feeling the way he was towards me. And what did it for me one day was that my best friend at the time, they were going out and they came by. Now, there was a window to the outside that you could see, and then you had like a counter, and then we were behind the counter. So you could look to this kind of street and see. She came by and she knocked. It was about 7:30 at night. And I turned around and she was waving, and I'll never forget it. Oh, gosh, you made me take me back there. I looked to her and she wasn't doing it to be facetious. She was listening, being like, hey, Pam, we're going out. I'll see you later, kind of thing. And that's when I thought, what am I doing? I don't have a life. I've been here for almost a year now. I'm working over 12 hours. All I do is go home, then I would sleep to be up again in like 4 hours to get up and go back to work and come back. By the time I get into bed and decompress, it's 10:30. I just didn't have a life. And I thought, this cannot be my life. And that was what I learned about. Look, if you're really good at what you do, people are either going to be grateful for your help or they're going to work from a space of fear and say, well, we need to control this person because we want this person to stay and we don't have to pay this person that much. So it was a lesson in understanding my worth. It's not about money, but it's about my worth and my value. And I started to understand that if you actually want to live a life too, because at this point, my brother had passed away. So, I mean, I wasn't really thinking in terms of quality of life per se, but then I was thinking about that. And I thought people will take advantage of you if you allow them. That was one of the things, I'd forgotten about that. My gosh, kid, that was a lesson.
Powerful lesson, though, Pamela, to learn. And thank God your friend came and knocked on that
Honestly,
window,
yeah,
to afford you the opportunity to think, because you were, again, the default program when we are plugged in, and we don't unplug until we have an event like that
mm-hmm.
where someone knocks. It's a simple event, knock, wave, and it
Oh, goosebumps.
was enough to arrest you and pull you into reality and looked at that going, what am I doing? And that is the very first question that you ask yourself. And those questions, once you have begun asking those questions, you have just began to become the observer, and your life is never going to be the same. So
Well, that's deep.
as when you become that and you become the observer by the question, once you ask that first question, you will never be the same, ever.
And they realized it, Ken, because
Yeah.
my head went down when I saw her, because that's when I was asking, what am I doing? And they started with
Mhm.
the manipulation. Oh, don't worry. When you're driving your Ferrari and when you're this and when you've got your house and where your friend, that was where I just was like, I don't care. They're out and I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
constructing.
Yeah. That's it. Your life changed from that moment. And so here you are now. You understand. I
Freedom.
love it because when you go into school now, your purpose and your focus will be that much more intense because you've been to the other side and you know what it's like over there and you don't want anything to do with it over there. So you landed in school. Your focus
Yeah.
is sharp. What did that do to you as to the fuel, if you will, that caused you to push and excel at that point in that school? I know it had to do with work, but how did you manage yourself in there with the knowledge of what happened at work?
The thing, my drive came from the fact that too, I had taken this giant leap of faith. So the way I was able to come over here was through a soccer scholarship. But in short, some girls saw me playing soccer in England, was starting a team and said, "Hey, we'd like for you to come over," and that's how I got to come over. And so I was working at the time. I wasn't there. Obviously, I switched to a different job, and at that time, it was slated for me to go high up in the company. It was Express Cargo Ultra Electronics, if I can remember. And the bosses didn't want me to leave. So I say this because you have those sliding door moments, or I guess those moments when you come to your life where you can make a decision and you either go this way, you go that way. And had I stayed at that
Crossroads.
company, right, crossroads, had I stayed at that company, I know that I would have been like the secretary of the CEO, because that's where they were slating me to go. I mean, that year I was slated to go to Paris for the Paris Air Show, and a junior secretary, that just doesn't happen. So when I left, I knew that I was giving up a lot to move and start all over again in a new country. So that was where a lot of my drive came from. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun in college because of this experience I had at my first ever job, was to find a balance in life and not just to work yourself to death. Work hard, yes, but you have to have a balance, because then what life do you have if you don't have that? So for me, when I got to come over, it was a cue to going into school, but then my dream at that time was to be a professional soccer player. And so that was what I was coming. And I knew that I had two plans: to do that and to get my degree. So I was driven to make sure that I did well in both areas. And that's just my spirit. Like I'm a
Yeah.
winner. I've never
Yeah.
failed
Yeah.
at anything I put my mind to, which I'm glad for that. I've just always had a drive.
But that's the key, though. You made a statement, and it's just a casual statement, but it's truth. You never fail whatever you put your mind to. That's the human being. That's the human body. The human being will never fail in what they really truly put their mind to. I mean, we are we're looking at Mars. We went to the moon. We're not gonna fail at what we put our mind to. And so I want to challenge you guys that are listening to Pam and I, put your mind to something. Decide on something. The human being is such a powerful force. The reason why you're living a circular life is because you haven't decided what you want to do yet. The minute you decide what you want to do, you will be amazed at how the synchronicity of people coming into your life with the tools and everything necessary, you will be able to become so proactive, and you send out that energy and you'll bring people to get what you want completed. You're that powerful. But as I said many times before Pamela and I started this thing, the human being can be very lazy, and the laziness will usher us into comfort. And that is one of the most dangerous place to be in life, to be a place of complacency.
That's what I was
Businesses
thinking
lose
about.
their market share because they become complacent. And I know many big businesses lose it. And you, as an individual, will lose it too. So get yourself a plan and get out from where you're at. So here you are. All right, you got your study, you got your life balance, you're partying and you're doing your thing, and all is well.
Balance.
Now
Balance
you are
is
gonna,
key.
yeah, and we call it. I love that how we hide behind it. My life balance, my
Life
life and
balance.
work balance. Yeah, I became a professional life balancer, So as you graduated, you got your piece of paper now that says to the world and to you, you have arrived at least one part of your dream. You got, the piece of paper. When you got that piece of paper, what happened to you as an individual? Because that is a major accomplishment for any individual to get to a dream that they have. And then we'll talk a little about the soccer piece of it, but your paper that you have, that critical piece, how did it land when you got it?
After you said land, it broke up. How did it land? What was the last part you said?
Yeah, how did it land in your spirit, in your being, when you got that piece of paper and you walked and you own it and you said, "Yeah, I achieved it." How did it land in you?
You know, now that I'm 46, if I'd walked the stage now, it would land more, it would land with more conviction. Because at that time when I did it, it was just, yeah, great, I've done it.
Yeah,
Like when I pursue my PhD and I get that, I know I will walk with that space with like, with this understanding. Because at that point in my life, it was just something that I'd set out to do. Don't get me wrong, I was still like, obviously very happy that I got it. And I realized, oh, great, it's a accomplishment. Great, you did it, Pam. All right, on to the next one. You know what I mean? And not fully digesting, my gosh, Pamela, you left everything that you knew in your homeland. You moved 5,500 miles across. You didn't know anybody. You made new friends. You studied and you graduated. There's some people that don't even do that. You know what I mean? I didn't accomplish that at home and I moved and I did it. And so at the time doing it and the way I feel about it now, yes, what a major accomplishment. It sat, but it was a ticket for me to move to Phoenix, which is what I did, and start all over again. I was able to relocate and get into a line of work that I wanted to be in, where I wanted to help people. So if anyone's listening and you're going through, listen, I beg you, be present and pat yourself on the back big time, because what a major accomplishment it is to graduate. My son graduated from high school 2 weeks ago. And it was such a thing to see him walk across that stage. And he's going into college. And I talked to him about, it's a great and fantastic time in your life. And you're opening a new chapter and you're starting to build, figuratively speaking, your own house now, your own house spiritually. You're building that for yourself. So
people
it's,
need to stop and appreciate those accomplishments. And as you said, most of us don't.
yeah,
We grab it and like, okay, let's get to the next thing, because again, it's part of the program that we have been instilled in us. And so we never really, not until you begin your journey and your personal development, that you hear the language of stop and celebrate what you have and stuff like that, your little accomplishment and whatever. But when you're plugged in, there is no such thing. There's just simply a get to the next phase. What's the next level? And you're not really having an opportunity to drink it in, if you will, and develop that life balance that she was talking about for
oh,
that
yeah.
couple of weeks before you go work. So here you go. Here you go, Pam. You got your thing. Talk to me a little about the soccer part of it, the sport part of it. What was happening with that? Because again, this journey that you're looking at was a twofold approach to your life that you were discussing. And as an individual, these were the two prominent roads, if you will, that you
Yes.
were walking along.
Thank you for asking the question. I'm glad that you asked it, because I was like thinking about it too as I was talking. And Jesus showed me that I got a gift, in fact, with the soccer, because as you say, yes, they were two important avenues of the decision. And it was my senior year, the last eligibility for playing. There was a league that was forming here called, back then they called it the Woosa League. It was the first
Yeah.
formation of the women's league. So there were new teams forming. And I used to play semi-professionally during the summers in order to kind of get my name out there and keep my name in the spotlight of what could happen. And so we were playing San Diego Spirit. And at the time, they were in the Woosa League one of the teams. And we played against them and didn't hear anything back, came back to school. So then during the school, we had another tournament where we had to go out to California. We played a Zizu Pacific, I believe it was, or team in that area. And we won. And I didn't know at the time there was a scout at the game. We won, I scored, I played well. And after the game, he approached me and he said, "Hey, there's this new league and we're kind of looking for new players and kind of hoping that, you might be looking to join." I was just, this was like, this is everything, this is what I've come. I was so excited about it. And it's like, we like the way you look and on the pitch and the way you play and bring other people in. So he gave me his number, and then there was a trial that was coming up that I had to go to, and so on and so forth. So we flew back, and I was over the moon. But then, sadly, the league folded. First time, whatever they were doing, like the league folded. And, I wasn't upset that the league had folded per se, because I'm a great component and believer in, look, things happen for a reason. And when it's your time, it's your time. But what it showed me is that I was good enough to get the call up, to get that chance to get there.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily my avenue, but that was closure for me. There was never a what if or coulda, shoulda. Like, I got scouted, I was going to go, then the league folded. So that's where professionally it ended. But that's okay. I mean, I still follow it now. I love it. I will always love it. I mean, it's Liverpool's my team. It was my avenue to coming here. I would never have been able to come
Chelsea,
here.
Chelsea girl, Chelsea
No, no, no,
blue,
no.
blue. Yeah, I'm a Chelsea. My best friend Tony is from London, and we're Chelsea boys. I gotta.
Hey,
Yeah,
there
I'm
you go.
Guyanese, man. We gotta. I'm familiar with all with all the boys. So I was trying to read them because I remember the team, and I was like, "Where's that team?" Because I couldn't remember the team that you really like. So here you are, man. And that is a beautiful closure, because some people don't have that, and that's a powerful way by which you may say God shut that door. Says, "Hey, you are skilled enough, but I need you over here. I need you here because there are some people that are not right.
Right. That I always find.
There's some people not right, and I'm gonna need your skill set to help them to get right." So here you are. You're now, that door closes, and the other door opens up, and you're there as a profession now. Once you got there, because this is quote unquote your second venture into the workforce,
Yeah.
because you had a good
Yeah.
time back there. And
God.
so when you got to this new location, if you will, what did that workforce look like compared to the one that you were from previously?
Well, when I graduated and I moved, the first job I got was in a group home. And I kind of knew, I had this sense of knowing. That's another part of like kind of like my gifts, I would call it. We all have them. Sometimes there's this innate kind of understanding that I have for my situation. And I knew that it would be a stepping stone and it was a learning curve. So, but I was grateful for having it. So I worked in a group home within the foster care system. It was a lady who knew the lady who did my hair kind of thing. And that's how I was able to get in. She was like, "Oh, you've just moved. So it's able to get in." So she owned a group home. And so I would go and literally babysit, I guess. I mean, they wouldn't call it babysitting, but to me, it was more than that. I was with girls. It was a girls' group home, and the girls were 10. They were between 8 and 10. There were about five of them in the home, and so that's where was my introduction to dealing with the foster care system, dealing with social workers, dealing with any workers who had come from the courts and the judicial system. Kind of that was my introduction to it. So what I would basically do was I worked the night shift as well. So that was my introduction to that. And I would just make sure that they had their dinner, their nighttime routine, that there was a body in the house if anything was needed. Medication was part of it. So we had to have that routine and make sure that their meds were taken, depending on what shift that you had. And I had the night shift. I would see them through to the evening and overnight. So I made sure that their medication was taken care of. And there wasn't so much as politics, I guess, you're dealing with the people who own the house and stuff. It was more so what I saw was business is business. And what I learned was there are some people where they need bodies in a house. And you see this sadly in the prison system, like that is privatized anyway. It's just about filling it up so that there's a profit that can be made. And I'm not saying that that was exactly what was happening here in the home, but I saw that a little bit of that component to it, and the fact that there are some kids, sadly, that have parents who necessarily maybe shouldn't have been parents. I started to learn and see that, and start seeing and rooting more for the underdog is what I learned working in the group home, with the kids. Like my job was to uplift them and make the kids feel seen, heard, and understood. You know, I, I just had the feeling to do that because it's like I felt like they didn't have an adult in their life, obviously, that maybe made them feel that way or made them feel understood. And so it kind of helped me really try and shine my light in a space where it was needed. And that's the beginnings of when I started to understand the importance of doing that. And that just one encounter with someone can just really change the trajectory of their life. And I necessarily don't know that, but just being kind, best being showing up, just smiling is something that doesn't cost anything that I could do.
What impact did it have on you?
Me,
Yeah.
it, I'll be honest, I felt angry, but obviously now understanding that I was hurt by the fact that it was sad that these kids were in this situation. And I just felt a sense of injustice, So it made me want to figure out how can I do something more. And I knew that maybe then trying to go into CPS or Child Protective Services maybe would be a better avenue to go down to have a different impact. Say. But it was
Isn't it
profound.
wonderful?
So sorry.
Yeah.
I felt for the kids. They were always the favorite part of my job for CPS that I knew, like going to visit the kids. I've always loved kids, always.
Yeah. There's a synchronicity to life. People don't think about it, but as one that I've been doing these interviews for many years now, and you see the process by which I ask to go into college and all these different things, and every time I've noticed and I've come to the knowledge of that there's a synchronicity to life that in every one of us. And here you are, your first pit stop, if you will, and that encouraged that did something to you that says, I need to do this. I need. And so that synchronicity of life I was talking about, everything has a purpose and a purpose for everything. And it is as we walk through our life, because a lot of people think their life is just haphazard. It is because you created that way for you, but it looked haphazard to you. When you come back out and you look at it, you'll see that you are creating that mess. You are a creator, guy. I don't care what you think. Your life is as messy as it is. You can at any time do exactly what God did in Genesis when he stepped in. He says, you know what? This is dark. I need to fix it. And then he says, he began to not demand, he began to express what he wanted. And so he says, let there be light. And there was. And so you have the very same capability in you because it says that they created us in the image and likeness. So I look like him, and his likeness was he was ordered to call things that are not as though they were. I can do it too. And so then you and I have no excuses. Your life that you live right now, you are creating it.
Absolutely.
Until you begin to take ownership, if you will, for what you're creating, you will never move. Take ownership
Absolutely.
for it. Decide, is this what I want? And if that's not what you want, I have someone that I'm talking to that knows how to guide you out of where you're at to take you to where you want. And so you guys pay attention to our conversation because I'm asking these questions because I'm pulling from her so that you can hear and be able to get some insight so that it can spark you and get you to move from where you're at to where you would like to be. You now decided that I needed to do other things. I need to be more effective in life. And that is going to mean that you're going to put the plans in order to make that happen. Talk to me as you're walking towards the book. You're doing all kinds of stuff. You're learning and that work balance life stuff. I love messing with you with that.
I love
Anyway,
it too. No, you're fine. You're fine. This is honestly really good. You're giving me a gift in itself. unearthing and remembering all of this and having me retrace this. This is good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm honored. So as you're moving through that and you're now moving from that space to another, again, the synchronicity of life, because you have an assignment to do and you're gaining all the insights and stuff like that to get to that place by which you are now going to serve. You're working, if you will, but you're going to come to this place where you transition from working, quote unquote, to now serving people. So as you're moving through and going to that process from working to servant, you're heading towards that direction. Talk to me as to that new location that you landed. Your intuition is given to you because you know that you are just squatting for a period. And you're moving towards this place of servant where you're going to put pages together, wisdom in a thing to excavate others' lifestyle, all those different things as you're moving towards that. When you landed to that second location, how did it look? What state was Pamela in at that point in time in our life? What was her being? How was she resting in the world? What was going on in her?
Just to clarify, so you're asking me from the point of view of when I began to write my book? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
from the working with the kids, heading to the direction to the book, that
Okay.
process there. What was she doing in that? What was Pamela like as she's beginning to navigate through this wonderful synchronicity of life, as they say? What was she like? What was her mind? What was her emotions? What was her pain? What was happening to her?
Gosh, this is during that time, that was the time of trials and tribulation. I was in, looking back, survival. There were some joyous moments, but it was a time period from my first job here, landing and moving through the cycle so that I could get to the point of writing my book. And during that space, it was turbulent. There was a lot of questioning why I'm going through this, questioning my faith at times. The joyous moments were when I did have time with my son and when I saw the kids at work. It was a really traumatic time for me, honestly, to be honest, when I look back, but it makes so much sense because I wouldn't have the story today and be in a position of wisdom to write my story if I hadn't experienced what it was like to get up and get knocked down again, and get up and get knocked down again, and get up and get knocked down again. I wouldn't know how to do that and teach people how to plug into spirit, because that's really important, because it fosters trust in the process and you receive miracles along the way. I wouldn't have understood how important my mindset is. And that's one of my strengths, my willpower, because what you think influences what you feel, which influences how you then act and behave. I wouldn't have understood that. I wouldn't have had my son, which is the biggest blessing to me in my life, an honor to be a mum. You know, I was in a space of turmoil and confusion and sometimes grievance, but I didn't necessarily act on it. But I share this so that people could understand that my life's not perfect and none of our lives are perfect. The messiness is where you grow and where you learn and where you come out on through the tunnel on the other side, and navigating that so that I can be in this position and look back and be like, my gosh, wow, I made it through that. It's not easy to be abandoned 10 weeks
Yeah.
before you're giving birth, right? It's not easy
Yep.
to face that and the situation.
I tell people, the darkness is to get you in contact with the creator that is in you. As I said before, we are lazy. And so not unless we are pressurized, and that's nature tells us this. The coal will sit there forever unless it's pressurized. And when it's pressurized,
Comes a diamond.
there's diamond. There's something that is beautiful and precious, and man will kill him and do all kinds of stuff for that
Right.
diamond. When gold is purified through heat, nature speaks to this all the time. That birth, that child, because again, I mentioned to Pamela, I was there and I saw my children birth. They all came out looking messy. And so that
Yeah.
tells me that the inside of this birth area is dark and messy.
Yeah.
But yet, there is life going on within the dark and the messy thing. And the birth itself of things is usually messy, but there's beauty in that. And this nature is teaching us this fundamental truth that all things that are given birth of quality must be pressurized. It must. You cannot be a individual that does not have any type of life lessons to give because you are boring. I don't want to talk to you. You have nothing to say. Absolutely nothing. Sit down, go through some mess, you come out on the other side, cry, bawl, you're crawling, you can't get out of bed, your head is all over the place. When you come out of that, let's have a conversation.
Right.
That's beauty. Before that, yeah, you're ugly as they come. And so don't be afraid of the dark times. The dark times are designed to give birth to something beautiful. Just allow it to happen. The process, as Pamela was talking about, as this messy process begins now, and you are now being, again, because it's ushering you towards servanthood. Jesus comes on the scene. Let me tell you, he gets there and he's serving. He says, he comes out. He was tested in the desert. You got to have your tests. You got to go through the dark times. So this boy came out of the desert, walks in and to the church, if you will, picks up the Bible, and then he picks it up and he reads and he says, "This is my assignment. I'm here to do that." He closed the book and then he went and began to do his assignment. And even when you start doing your assignment, there will come places and times that one must surrender all the way through. And that is personal growth. Jesus Christ was in the garden. God tell him, "You got to go on the cross." And he said, "No, man, we ain't going out like that." And he had a conversation with his father. And at the end of this thing, he says, oh man, okay. Not my will, but thy will. Beyond that, surrendering, all of us have to come there because it's taking us to the ultimate place that we want to be. So now here you go, Pamela. You're in the dark spaces. He's taking you now to that area by which you are going to have the fulfillment of the assignment in your life, if you will. And he is now going to put a little pressure on you. That pressure that he puts in your chest and your uneasiness. And he says, I need you to write some stuff down for me. Talk to me about that process that he walks you through, takes you to this book, and he says, I need you to give birth to something because we're going to use that as a part of the platform to take you to another level, to us. Walk us with you as you're walking from that dark space to the book. What did it look like? What did the pressure look like? Because I know the Father. I know it.
I feel, and I got goosebumps at this. I know it. I feel like he's here, and I feel like he's working through you. I'm honestly asking me these questions because I'm just like, and I love that. It's powerful. I love Jesus so much. In answering your question, I begrudgingly started to write because I didn't want to do it, in all honesty. I'm talking, it took signs right out here because our home backs out onto wood. So yeah, it looks different now, but this is where I wrote my book. And I'm talking hawks don't just come and land and peck and be like, and then the cardinals that were like singing and dancing at the bottom there, 6 of them. But to get to that point, that was when I finally was like, okay, I'll write the book. I didn't want to do it because I had suppressed all the emotions, everything that I felt, everything that happened to me. I was in a lot of pain. It was very difficult, to think about it this way in terms of I was alone. I felt very alone. So obviously my family doesn't live here. It was me. So I was in a foreign land. I was starting again. I was with a family that I thought was decent. Boyfriend at the time didn't want the responsibility. And that wasn't the hardest part of it. It was not what he did. It was the way he did it. I nearly died. Our son nearly died. Because for me, I'm just like, I can get on with it. Not a problem. But then it was the ensuing judicial weaponization afterwards where I didn't have a life. I wasn't free. And I know a lot of people would be able to relate to that part as well. Having to deal with work, being alone, the loneliness I felt, and the rejection wasn't about it. It was just I felt very alone and I felt controlled. I wasn't free to live my life. When I finally got out, the lesson was acceptance. And once I had learned that, because you said about surrender, that's why I said I know Christ is here, because that was what I needed to do. And it's hard for me to surrender, right? Hard for most of us to do it. When especially got that personality, you just want to pick up and go, and you're a go-getter and get things done. Sometimes, and what I teach my clients now is that you control what you can, and that's your thoughts and your emotions. And how you react to something, and you have to surrender the rest. That's what's you have to surrender. But we try to control everything. And so by the time I arrived at writing my book, I was married, or I'd gotten married. My husband adopted Mikey. Dealing with stepkids and that was another tribulation in itself. But so to get to where I was when I was writing my book too, I had left social work at that time. I had a career change and I was making leather handbags that were doing really good. The premise was beautiful imperfection. And I would use the scars of the leather to showcase, just like you said about Japanese earlier on, that's wabi sabi. So I didn't know that. It was a client who told me that. She's like, oh my God, this is the same concept. Using the beauty and the scars and imperfection to show how beautiful, not just we are, but how life really is, and the impermanence, right? So I was there, I was doing really good with that. But then COVID hit, and all the work that I'd done again, because as you said the farmer, I had spent 5 years building this thing up. I'm talking about we were on TV, Fox, like local TV for my bags and getting notoriety for them and then getting orders and then COVID. So during the midst of it, I'm like, oh, this notion came up again about writing this bloody book. And at first I was like, so then I tried to start. I first started in 2017 and I put it down. 2018 did it and wrote it all and it flew out of me. Put it down. Then COVID, like I say, when COVID hit, that's when I really started to pay more attention to the seriousness of it and delve in to do it because, like I said, I didn't want to. And that's hence why once I finished, I went to a therapist, as I knew then I had to then do this growth work myself because I had just stuffed my emotions to survive and to make sure I raised my son and get on with it. But it took signs from the universe to say, and that's where I wrote from that space, knowing that I said each time it was difficult, my intention is to bring hope to people that no matter what happens in your life, you get knocked down, you can get up again. Because people who have read my book, the first thing they say is, I had no idea you've been through all of that. Because they see me, they see my face, they see my smile, and that's the beauty of life. You can still have your vitality, you can still be empowered when horrible things have happened to you. It doesn't mean you stay there. And that's the thing. My mentality is not victim. I am a creator and I'm going to create good things and positive things for myself. That's just the way I see it. Gosh, wow. Yeah. So just to be sure, are you asking through my journey how I'm able to help other people? One that clearly for me springs to mind was a lady that that I knew. She had just had a baby, and on my journey, what I remember with that is obviously is that people don't mean to do this, but when you have a baby, it is all about the baby, and they forget about the mom, sadly. And that's not to say that we want attention by any means. It's just a lot that you're dealing with. Everyone's situation is different, but especially if you're by yourself and you have the baby, and then things, the baby, everyone wants to be seen, heard, and understood. And from my experience, when I became a new mom, I could see that this person was struggling. She was struggling with her identity. She was struggling with if she's a good mom. And she was struggling with like thoughts in terms of like depression and wanting to be here kind of thing. And we went out for breakfast. I took her out for breakfast and her baby was with her. So I held her baby just so that to give her a break because it's just the little things. And I just felt that I needed to see her for her and it be about her and not necessarily the baby, because naturally is what we do. So then she began to open up to me about how she was struggling as a first time mom, and she didn't know who she was now, and she doesn't feel seen. And she's just having these thoughts that I just don't think I can do it. I don't want to be a mom. So as I listened to her, I knew exactly how she felt because I'd experienced it myself. And so I opened up to her a little bit just so that she could see that I understood where she was coming from. And then I kind of said to her about what helped me was Christ and plugging in and understanding that I could get through it and that I would. And I think just in talking to her about the fact that I'd experienced what she was and that she wasn't crazy was the thing. Because that was another component to it, that we always think that we're suffering in silence and nobody else is going through that same thing, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, look at Pamela now and look what she's doing and I never knew kind of thing. And when she was able to see and understand that I'd experienced something like that and look where I was, the light bulb kind of went off for her that, well, I could do that too. I could be there too. And I'm not crazy for feeling this way. I was like, girl, you've got hormones flying through your body as well. And like, you've been through something traumatic yourself. And you know, relatively for her, even though like her birthing situation, they're all traumatic as we discussed, even the ones that go swimmingly well, right? Because it's a miracle bringing the baby into the world. But I know what I had severe preeclampsia and I almost bled to death. So did my son, almost like, so I mean, it was like very, so I kind of understood how to speak to her, how to listen, and just her understanding that, my gosh, I'm not alone in this. She then decided to kind of take steps. So I helped her. I said, you know what helped me? I said, to start feeling good about yourself, maybe have you thought about working out? Like, that doesn't mean you pound stuff, but even taking a walk, taking time for yourself. And then, you know, maybe your husband can watch the baby while you do that. You know, I started to try and engage her to doing stuff that can fill her cup and delegate in responsibility as well. And just us talking about that, you could just see her, like her disposition changed and that she was more optimistic. And I think that to me was huge. And then to see her, like, you know, months later, they were about to move. She was happy, like they were going to move. The husband found a new post and they were going to move. And she was back working out and doing all these things and was in a much better spot. And to be able to see that, I think that was really cool. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for giving me that perspective of looking at it that way again, because you know, yeah, all the culmination of incidences that have led to in my life to get to that point. And it wasn't until I finished writing my book where I began to see the natural process that I take to heal and where I obviously wanted to share with the world in doing the same thing. And it's birthed through basically the 7 key principles that I've discovered to the healing. And they all build from a steady foundation all the way to the top. And the first being leaning on a circle of support. No healing can occur without connection to either Christ or other people. So the first step in the Ramoni method really is about leaning and tapping into your circle of support, professional and personal help. The second, acknowledging self-doubt, is about embracing imperfection. We cannot make changes if we don't not only take accountability, but if we're not willing to see what we're bringing to the table in the situation. None of us are perfect. And in that imperfection and understanding that, it allows us to say, you know what, yeah, maybe this was the mistake that I made. Because when you own that, you take control of what you can by saying that I'm not going to make that mistake again. I maybe opened that door and maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do. But next time, instead of opening number 2, I'll go for number 4. So the second step is about acknowledging and embracing imperfection so that you can release the emotions that have come from whatever the trauma that is, because that's the other component to it. You have to acknowledge how you feel so that you can release it. The third step is about survival, and it's the part where you take action, implement a plan, and you decide this is the steps that I'm going to put forward towards my goal, whatever that goal may be, leaving a brutal relationship, healing my marriage, finding a new job, whatever that may be for the person, put steps in place so that you then can take action towards achieving whatever that goal may be. It's about growth. And that's where you trust the process that we talked about. I discovered that healing can't occur, personally, I feel, without faith, without plugging into something bigger, without being present. Now, for me, I'm more spiritual. I was raised Catholic, but where I am in my life, I'd fallen away from that. And the book talks about that. But I believe in Christ and I'm so plugged into Jesus Christ, and I wouldn't be here without him. And when you trust the process, it allows you to keep moving, keep walking forward. If you don't have that, it's easier to get complacent. It's easier to stay where you are. It's easier for fear to seep in. And then you want to just not go and put the steps, walk towards these steps that you put in. So after you trust the process, then you have to see a better future for yourself. So this is where visualization comes in. seeing a better outcome for yourself. And when you believe, you will be shown. That's what I learned on my journey. So during this process too, it's important to reward yourself. Do little things for yourself that help you keep going. That's what I learned on my journey. And then 6, maybe the most important, really, if you do this in the beginning, then it maybe negates the other steps. That is acceptance, forgiveness. It was the final lesson I had to learn for me to realize, my gosh, when I don't forgive someone, I'm drinking the poison thinking that they're the recipient, and it's not the case. I'm holding my own self back when I don't let go. So one has to accept, and accept doesn't mean you agree with what happened. What you're saying is, this is my reality. I'm moving forward from this reality now. How can I make it better? We're just getting your head in the game. And then the last part is maintenance, which is the healing. And that's where you do the work that fills your cup in terms of nourishing your body, your mind, and your soul. That's what this bridge has been on my journey. For me to understand, because it was funny, we were joking about the balance and stuff, where it originated from, where I first understood, my gosh, if you don't have balance in life, you are constantly going to be in grievance. You're constantly going to have emotional wounds that come up that you then stuff, and then they block you without you realizing, because you're not letting go, and that is the Ramoni method. Understanding and releasing these emotions that are keeping you stuck, and then building a self-care routine for yourself that helps keep you in an optimum space where you can function, where you're connected, where you're not stressed, or you move through that cycle quickly. The pain comes, you build resilience. And so that is the Ramoni method. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.